Hello everyone. In this report, we cover the topic on US-Russia conflict over Venezuela. So I begin it now. In early 2026, the United States launched a dramatic military operation in Venezuela, capturing former president of Venezuela and his wife, bringing them to US on federal drug and narco terrorism charges. This followed months of escalating tensions in the region. President of US declared the United States would oversee Venezuela during a transitional period and asserted that Washington was in charge of the country. The US action involved precision strikes in Caracas, special forces operation to extract the president of Venezuela, transfer the president to New York for legal processing. US officials argue the operation was lawful, framed as enforcement of long-standing indictment, not conventional war. As part of the escalation, US forces seized two oil tankers, including the Russian flag uh, Marinera, accused of violating sanctions and transporting Venezuelan and or sanctioned oil. Russia criticized this as illegal maritime seizure and termed it piracy, citing the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. US also plans to manage Venezuela's oil production and sales, positioning it as beneficial for both Venezuela and global oil markets, a move that has significant geopolitical and energy market implications. Russia strongly condemned the US action, labeling it a neo-colonial threat against Venezuelan sovereignty and affirming support for Venezuela's interim leadership. Some analysts in Russia and international media see the operation as a sign that great powers now act with little regard for traditional legal constraints, a dynamic Russia has struggled to challenge. Despite public denunciation, Russian president has remained cautious in his comments, focusing instead on the strategic priorities such as ongoing conflict in Ukraine and broader great power rivalry with United States. At the United Nations Security Council, several countries including Brazil, China, Cuba and Mexico condemned the US strikes and capture of the Venezuelan president, calling the operation a violation of sovereignty and international law. The US defended itself by distinguishing a law enforcement operation from conventional war. Reactions across Latin America were sharply divided. Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Uruguay, Spain strongly condemned the US action as unlawful and dangerous. Argentina applauded the capture, viewing it as advancing freedom. Heightened border security amid fears of instability or influx of refugees. European Union leaders urged caution, emphasizing respect for international law and stressing that any transition in Venezuela must reflect the will of its people. Israeli Prime Minister publicly praised the US action as bold leadership, showing divisions beyond the Western Hemisphere. The Venezuelan government reported that roughly 100 civilians were killed in cold blood during the US operation, declaring a week of national mourning and strongly condemned the incursion. This claim has fueled sharp international criticism with significant debate over civilian impact, legality, and humanitarian consequences. R- Russia's loss of the vice president, Russia's loss of the president of Venezuela, a long-time ally, weakens the influence in Latin America and signals limits to Moscow's ability to protect distant partners when confronted with US. when confronted with US military power, especially as Russia remains heavily focused on Ukraine. Yet some voices within Russia argue that the US move demonstrates a new era of power politics, where force, not law, shapes outcomes, echoing old style geopolitical competition. The US asserts that its actions aim to disrupt narcotics networks and terrorism finance, restore stability in unsanctioned states, secure energy supplies and legal order. However, by directly using force and detaining a sitting head of the state, the US sets a controversial precedent with potential long term impacts of sovereignty norms and regional security. That's our report about the current Venezuela crisis and the impact it has on the global power, US and Russia. Thank you for tuning in with us. Have a great time.